exploration expert James Cameron made some public statements about what could have possibly gone wrong. But what do his body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal? And more importantly, what is he not saying about how this could have been avoided? What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation,
his name is Spidey.
And over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stage.
I haven't seen his actual
In one of the most talked about tragedies of the year, a submersible named Titan, which is operated by OceanGate expeditions, went mysteriously missing during one of its excursions in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. Days later, it was confirmed that the vessel, which has a capacity of 5 people, imploded, tragically claiming the lives of all of its passengers. Now, since the goal of this
such a small vessel,
was to
man,
visit the wreck of the Titanic, ABC News decided to interview some experts on deep sea expeditions that pertain specifically to the Titanic. As such, they sat down with Robert Ballard, who was the first deep sea explorer to ever set eyes on the Titanic, as well as Hollywood director James Cameron, who has visited the Titanic personally 33 times. Now, usually in my analysis videos with
33 times. Oh shit,
we look at the potential for deception versus the likelihood of honesty. In this case, there isn't a whole lot of deception going on. They're being quite honest about the answers that they're providing. However, this interview is a masterclass of using nonverbal communication to understand someone's priorities and what's going on in their heads. And as an entertainer, as a mentalist, that's my specialty. That's what I do. So with that said, and the following pun...
One of your cousins were talking about this the other day when you were drinking, and he thinks this was a conspiracy for these billionaires to fake their death so they could start a new life. That's an interesting, crazy listening to her talk about it. Yeah, that's an interesting, I never heard that conspiracy theory, but that's...
Let's dive in.
And Robert, thank you both so much for joining us. Bob, let's start with you. What first...
But like, if you're a billionaire, why would you want to start a new life? Like, yeah, why? Surely you could just disappear easier. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, yeah. But yeah. Or just like, even if you, like, you just don't use the money, just go, I don't know, go to somewhere and... Or you could have like a, I don't know, I'm sure they have like disguises where you could like change your face a little bit.
Your mind when you heard the news today? I understand you both have a deeper understanding of this than most. So what was your first thought today?
Well, when it happened, both Jim and I were at sea on that Sunday, and Jim called me and told me about it, and we both instantly knew that it was gone. The only way you could explain it was a catastrophic implosion. And we all...
Does this guy not have a head?
Because we knew today would be the
eyebrow
day
on
when it
on
would
the
be confirmed.
Right hand side?
Jim?
Okay, so right in the beginning, in the way that they are greeting the camera and the viewers, there's a vast difference, and it's kind of giving me some clues as to how this interview is going to go. Let's start with Rob Ballard on the right. So once again, Robert Ballard is the first person to have ever set eyes on the wreck of the Titanic. Back in 1985, he designed a vessel, he got funding from the Navy. So when he's being introduced here, we see something very recognizable on his face, and it's a mouth shrug, and it's held for a pretty long time. So shrugging is a gesture that we see most often in 4 body parts: the shoulders, the hands, the eyebrows, the mouth, and often we see a head tilt along with a shrug. Any combination of these can constitute a shrug. Now, there's a ton of great research on shrugging and what it means. I have an entire video explaining the science of it. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to learn more about it. But basically, shrugging comes down to a lack of something. I don't know, I don't care, I don't want to do that, I don't know what to say. So it's I don't something. But that mouth shrug that we see on his face right in the beginning as he's being introduced is unmistakable. We often see it in moments where someone else is talking or we're socially connecting with someone. So the mouth is raised exactly like that. And sometimes we see a bit of a nod going along with it, but it's rare to see a lot more going on. It's usually in a pretty calm moment. And it falls under the category of epistemic shrug and loosely translates to, I don't know what to say, I don't have the right words. In fact, this is an expression that we see enormously in moments of shared grief. So if you go into a funeral home or a tragic event, we often see people greeting each other exactly that way. The lips are up.
Okay, yeah. That makes
like this
sense.
as they
That
look
makes
at
sense.
someone. It's, sorry, I don't know what to say.
Makes
I
sense.
wish we were meeting under different circumstances. And that's exactly what I think is happening here with Mr. Ballard. I think he's aware of the fact that he's here to talk about something unpleasant. And so when he's introduced, we're getting this
1 second. Sorry.
greeting. So it is a social moment, but the lips are saying, don't know what to say. This is a big tragedy. Then we have James Cameron, and there's a lot of interesting
Oh, that was your argument
as
too?
well, just in that moment of greeting. So first of all, you'll notice from James Cameron, we are getting a bit of a smile right in the beginning. And it's not a bad smile, because often we see these tight-lipped, closed-lipped, like polite smiles. But what's interesting about his is that the cheeks are also smiling like this. Now, obviously, James Cameron is part of the Hollywood world. He's done a ton of interviews. He's used to them. So he has a very well-practiced, polite smile. But here's what's really interesting. If we cover the top of his face and the bottom of his face, they're doing two very different things. The bottom of his face is smiling. Now again, I wouldn't say it's the most genuine, big, open smile, but the cheeks are up. We have a smile there. So
I'm just calling you back to
let you know that
I love you
and I miss you.
Yo, what's up, Orlando? We're watching the behavioral arts. This guy, I like his videos. It's pretty cool. Did James Cameron know the OceanGate Titan would implode? Body language analyst. And then while we're collecting clues, we got 4 clues right now. We haven't really collected much, but yeah. You're out of beer now, but convenience store opens up in half an hour. 1.5 hours.
But if we block the bottom half and just look at the top half, there's almost nothing in there that would indicate a smile or happiness. In fact, his eyebrows are down like this, and they're going to stay down like this for most.
You're just waiting for your flight? Oh, okay.
In fact, this is quite common.
So you're going.
Even if you go watch
Oh
other
man.
of his, to varying degrees, he often has his eyebrows down like this as he talks. Now, a lot of
Is that a long flight?
Analysts or behavioral analysts will say this is baseline. It actually goes beyond being baseline. This is called an idiosyncratic behavior. So baseline is behaviors that we see in someone given a certain interaction. So within this interaction, I'm observing that this person is blinking a lot or they keep scratching their head. That would be baseline. It's within this conversation. Idiosyncratic behaviors or gestures are gestures that we see someone do regardless of circumstance. This is the way this person moves or communicates.
Elvis, Arch Glacier is hit or miss. Everybody's like really lucky or not at all. Like they were supposedly going to change something on the Arch Glacier, but they haven't yet, so I don't know.
So
he's going out of country to work.
Down is pretty idiosyncratic. I've seen it in a lot of different interviews, including this one. Another thing that really caught my attention here is something that I give a lot of importance to as a mentalist, but also as a professional interviewer, and that thing is decisions. The decisions that we make communicate to people, to the outside world, our priorities and what we value most. So if we look at Robert Ballard, there is a very clear message here on what his priorities are. So if we look behind him, like this is where he chose to sit for this interview, we see a control panel with some monitors, and we're seeing this graph up top, we're seeing footage of the Titanic, we're seeing this presentation on one side. On the table behind him, we can see his book, Into the Deep, and he's even wearing a shirt that says EV Nautilus, which is a vessel that is owned and operated by the Ocean Exploration Trust, which is a company that he founded in 2008. And all these things tell me that this man values being informed and competent above other things.
Man's got ORS sailing skill data on his monitors.
Clothing with a logo or branding on it, because depending on context, it could mean different things.
Yeah, nobody knows for the.
I often seminar or perform at corporate functions.
Just do 0 till death.
Employee of a company wearing logo or branding from the company, it tells me that this person puts a lot of importance on loyalty or belonging, and they like to feel like they're part of this family. If I see someone wearing branding or a logo that they are not affiliated with, most of the time, this is a form of self-expression. It's showing an interest of theirs or something about their personality, their likes and their dislikes.
Okay,
If I
yeah,
see
that makes
someone
sense.
wearing something that is their own brand, like something that they developed, they worked on, or belongs to them, usually it's self-promotion. So we could look at Robert Ballard
Right.
here and think that way, that there's an element of self-promotion here. He's got his book, he's got this branding that's part of the company that he founded, but I don't think that's what it is. Because as we listen to him talk, this man has very little ego. He doesn't have that typical trying to get the spotlight, trying to lift himself. He's not really looking for that attention.
He's getting all this
He's not really
information from this
consistent with that
little, like that one sentence. I feel like he only spoke like one sentence, right? I don't know. Maybe he can tell. I don't know. Cool. That's
person.
cool.
I think all these things
Kind
are
of
here to
interesting.
establish I know my stuff when it comes to this. In fact, we're instantly going to get a confirmation that this is someone who values.
Oh yeah, we have catch you later, cahoots. Don't worry, don't worry.
Listen to the question and listen to the answer. The question is, what did you think today when you found out? So this is happening on the day where they found out for a fact that the vessel had imploded. What happened in your head when you found that out today? Listen to his answer. He doesn't talk about today. He goes back to last Sunday when they first found out that there was a sound or something like that, and how both him and James Cameron knew in that moment, we knew right away that this
It
had
was
happened.
gone.
So he's not starting from today. Obviously it was very tragic to find that out. And then you could go, but we suspected so by going back. But his first thing that he says is, the moment we heard on Sunday that this such and such thing happened, we knew because we know this. I have this information. I know this space. Now, I think there's maybe another element that plays.
Can we get a
into
body
why his answer
analysis
doesn't
to
answer
check
the
if he's
question,
legit?
and that's-
Oh, like body analysis checks him and he checks this other guy. Yeah, that would be interesting. Is he being sincere of telling us the right
some
answer?
sort of a script
Yeah, that would be interesting.
that he's sticking to. He probably came in anticipating, okay, they're going to ask me this, they're going to ask me that. So in his head, it's possible that he's sticking to that plan of starting at that point. However, I think a really big element of this and why he's not answering the question that's being asked is because his priority is to say, I know this space. Look, I wrote a book about it. This is the kind of stuff I'm familiar with. I founded a company and I knew way before everybody else.
His next
when
video is
James
just
Cameron told me, we both knew that this catastrophe had happened.
a lot of people do that, right?
Did his answer where he goes, right, Jim, throwing it back.
Like react to your own video. Yeah. I think a lot of people do that. Like old videos, of course, not like yesterday's video you reacted it today, but
to James Cameron. And this.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Me first.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to that lack of ego. A lot of people who have this big ego and want to self-promote, they're on television, they kind of become unaware of others and they just talk, and it's all about themselves. He's briefly answering the question. He's referencing Jim, even in his answer, he's saying, Jim called me, we both knew. So he's sharing that spotlight. He has no problem with that. It also indicates to me that as an authority on the subject matter, he trusts James Cameron. He's saying, James is as equipped to talk about this as I am. And throughout the interview, we're going to see that a lot. And this is something we see often in people who prioritize information and competence. If there's someone in the room that they feel is very informed.
Sorry, one second. Why am I not getting dropped, bro? Where's the drops, man? Let me step one step this way. All right, let me go back.
Have no problem sharing that spotlight with that person. Okay, now we're going to look at James Cameron's answer and his behaviors and a very interesting shift that's going to start to happen as the interview progresses and what it indicates. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content. Also, for regular viewers
go
who
follow
want to
him.
support the channel, make sure to check out the membership section to find out what perks you can get on the channel. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't think we wanted to come forward. I got, as you did, Bob, approached by many outlets for comment, and it just seemed like speculation, even though we felt we knew what the outcome was going to be, and it was certainly zero surprise to me today. I was even able to visualize the wreck site in my mind over the last few days, and
wow.
as described, I think it's exactly what we expected. But, you know, I can't imagine what these poor families have been through over the last 4 days, being given false hope here, banging noises, da da da, this and that. And, you know, it must have been just, you know, horrible for them. And I feel so bad for them. But I also felt that, as we agreed, Bob, that it would be insensitive to come forward with a dissenting voice to the story that was in motion at the time.
So Richard Bandler and John
It
Grinder
was like he
were the
knew, but
pioneers of neurolinguistic programming, or NLP. And as someone who worked in therapy,
neuro-linguistic
something that I've
programming is an
for
approach
quite
that
some time, and I think that-
focuses on how you communicate with yourself and others, and how this affects your behaviors and behaviors outcomes.
there are elements to it that I think are really strong and work really
Okay.
effectively, and other elements to it that I don't really personally subscribe to. But there's definitely some value in some of the stuff that's taught in NLP. And one of the things that is very much used outside of people who only practice NLP, therapists use this, communications experts use this, is used in sales, and it's called the representational system. The representational systems is the way that each of us as individuals.
Sorry, I got distracted by a heart. I don't know why he has like a heart, ace heart in the window, and then this light. Yeah, anyways, back to it. Representational system. Right?
Take in or communicate information. So there are people who are visual, which understand things more in terms of images, and you're better off showing them things that are visual or explaining things to them in images. There are auditory people who connect more with what they hear. Even as they think back, they're more likely to think of things that were said than things that were seen. And each of these have little subcategories as well.
I think I'm
Now,
visual.
This isn't something that I
Visual
always look
learner.
for in people, because I think that, you know, we all have a mix of these things, but every now and
More
then you can't
visual.
ignore that someone is blatantly one of these things. And James Cameron is extremely obviously a visual within the representational systems. First of all, the guy's a movie director with some of the best visuals the world has ever seen. I mean, if you look at Avatar, just the visual beauty of it, you know, obviously this is coming from someone who pays a lot of importance to what's seen. But even just within the answer we saw, there are so many clues. First of all, he goes, I was able to visualize the wreck site. That is such a Hollywood director thing to say. It's like his mind is going to that movie scene and how he would see it on a movie screen. Then as he's talking about the families of the victims, and he says it must have been horrible for them, we see his eyes go downwards like this as his head does this. Now, this is not specific to people who are visual. You'll see this with auditory and kinesthetic people as well. In fact, going downwards like this is very common everywhere in the world for sad emotions. Usually with happiness, we go up, and then with sadness or negative emotions, things tend to go downwards like this. So it's very common. However, for visual people, it is quite common to turn away when you paint them an unpleasant image. So you might tell something because it's kind of like they visualize it and just want to turn away from it. So you may not see a kinesthetic person, for example, might continue to connect with, oh my God, I'm so sorry, because this connection is important to them. But visual people do tend to turn away from negative images. I want you to notice as we go on in this interview how often he uses his hands to place things as he's communicating. It's almost like he has this
visual
board
in
in
his
front
mind.
of him, and he literally places images in places as he talks about them. But something that's really, really common is when he's talking about something that he wants to put distance between him and that thing, we see the right hand go outwards this way to his right. And we're going to see this numerous times in this interview and in another
Why? Because he
interview
doesn't want
about the exact
it
same
near
thing.
him or something?
But right
like
now, I want you to notice right there, as he's saying, we didn't want to be a descending voice on the story that was in motion, we see this gesture to the right. This story, not his story. This isn't the story. He knew what was happening. There's other story that was out there.
Okay.
And
That
we're
makes sense.
seeing
That makes
this
sense.
distancing right there. But pay attention to it. We're going to see it numerous more times.
I feel that this was such a preventable tragedy. We've never had a tragedy like this in the entire history of deep submergence. Even most of the tourist operations around the world use certification from, let's say, ABS, the American Bureau of Shipping. And this particular outfit didn't do that. I had deep concerns
This
about
particular
the technology that they were
outfit.
using, composite
Why do they call it outfit? But anyways,
composite fiber, wound filament, hull, which I don't believe has any place in deep submergence. And I know a thing or two about the engineering that goes into subs. I designed and built my own sub and went, at one point 10 years ago, went 3 times deeper than Titanic.
All right, so we're starting
Oh,
off
wow.
with him saying we've never
Damn.
had a tragedy like this. We see a very interesting version of the steeple. So the steeple is this. Typically, we might see this in meetings with people in a position
Steepling.
of power, usually quite
Steepling.
confident, and it comes
Oh,
from a
okay,
place
okay.
of authority. It's quite a confident position with the hands
Right,
like this
right.
in front of the torso. In this case, it's a little different than that. The fingers are together, but so are the palms. And we often see this as well as a form of steepling. Now, this adds a bit of a pleading
please.
element to it.
Yeah,
Often
yeah,
we see
that's what I
someone
was
saying,
thinking.
please. We might see this. You could also see hands up when someone's asking for something, but these are very common gestures when someone's asking for something.
Okay. Yeah.
In this case, I feel like if there is a plea element to this, it's almost pleading with the audience to believe that, this is so avoidable. This has never happened. Please believe me, this is not something that happens. So I think it's a mix of like authority.
So don't
and
be scared
confidence
of
in the
other
subject, but I think there might
aquatic
also be
thing.
a bit of a pleading element. Now notice what happens when he says
Did I
this
miss
has
it?
never happened in the history. As he says the words history, that left hand goes like this, back in time. And this is something we see very commonly with visual thinkers when they talk about timelines. Things that happen as they move through that timeline, we see them gesture as well on that timeline. The past is here, and then this happened, and then that's going to happen. We see this a lot because, whereas a kinesthetic person is all over the place with their emotions, a visual person really visualizes that timeline and sees the progression of things visually. So super common.
Yeah, it sounds
making me
cool.
Quite
I mean, it
confident
sounds.
that James Cameron
could-
is a
I
very
could
visual
see-
thinker. To stay
that.
consistent with what we were talking about earlier, how he goes to the right when he's distancing from a thought, the moment he talks about this particular outfit, so he's talking about, this and history and all these things, the moment he talks about the OceanGate, we see him place it like this.
Somewhere
So he
else.
has this gesture, and it's like this
Not
placing motion
me.
where he's putting it away from himself. And we're going to see this again and again and again when he's distancing. It's off to the right with this pushing motion. Look for it.
Right.
There is a hilarious gesture when he goes, and I know a thing or two about engineering, and he goes on to talk about, how he really knows this space. And this is a gesture that's really commonly seen with a humble brag or almost like a sarcastic reminder of like, hello, like I'm here. So we often see the hand outwards like this. Sometimes one with him, it's both hands. And palm outward, pretty much anywhere in the world, is a negation or a way to get someone's attention. So whether we're negating something like stop or trying to get someone's attention, so I guess it's still kind of like stop, hi, I'm here. Palms outwards is like trying to like negate or get attention. So in this case, it's
That
kind of
makes
like
sense.
trying to get attention, like, hello, this guy, hi. And we see it with that smirk often, and he's got that sideways smirk,
Oh, yeah, like
and
a
it's kind of like
quick smile.
the head thrusts forward, and it's usually consistent, like I said, with someone going, they were looking for an expert on this, but hello, hi.
I know you both knew Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate. If you both could just talk to me a little bit.
Pylons are people putting in those little pylon batteries, so it's kind of random, I think. They're not like on a set schedule. It's more very random actually. But as soon as I think I don't remember what quick chat or not quick chat, friends chat had, pylons and stuff, but maybe that's a good idea to add onto the RuneScape bot. I'll let Paul know, maybe, if there's a way to add that. That and the Osseous Roar.
Who he was, what his dream was, and what needs to happen now that this has happened.
Well, he was a dreamer. I met him. He was very young when I first met him, and he told me about his dream to develop a technology to dive on the Titanic. But that was about it. I wasn't that involved at all. Jim really understands the engineering science on that particular submarine. I've dove in 9 different deep submersibles, and I've never worried about the integrity of the hull.
So now the reporter brings up the subject of Stockton Rush, who was the CEO of OceanGate. And obviously is to blame for what happened here. Now, this is a very sensitive subject because both of these gentlemen probably want to say that he shouldn't have done this, it wasn't ready. You know, they want to like blame him. But they're also sensitive to the fact that, you know, they've known the guy for a while and he just lost his life down there as well. And he has family that's grieving as well. So it's such a sensitive position to say, you know, maybe what you want to say, you know, he made a lot of mistakes while being cognizant of the fact that this man lost his life. So
That's
it's a tough spot to be. And
Okay.
we see it both in the words and in the gestures of both gentlemen. So you'll notice
They know
as
how
the
to
subject
speak.
comes up,
Know how to speak.
James Cameron has both his hands like this in front of him. And as the reporter's asking the question, we see his eyes go down like this. And I believe in this moment, what he's doing is he's obviously feeling
Reflecting.
the tragedy of the loss. Like this is someone he knew who passed. So I think we are seeing that there. But I also believe there's an element here of him thinking about, you know, how am I going to do this? How am I going to navigate
Oh,
this
or
very
that.
difficult
Okay.
question? And
Yeah,
right
yeah.
at the end of that question, we kind of see him nod like this. And I think that's him going, okay,
that's what I'm
guys,
gonna do.
I think I know how I'm going to answer this. If we look at Bob Ballard, on the other hand, the moment Stockton Rush comes out, look at his expression. We see a very long eye blocking and a
Eye blocking.
nodding
Oh,
gesture.
okay. Closing his eyes.
Eye blocking is something we study a lot in nonverbal communication because it's
He
something
doesn't
that
wanna
we
see
even
it.
see in children that were
Okay.
born blind. And think of the eyes as the garage door to your thoughts. So
Wait, what do you
we're
say?
trying to hold something.
They can tell even with the. Let me see. Go back.
So eye blocking is something we study a lot in nonverbal communication because it's something that we even see in children that were born blind. And
Really? Even people that were born blind, they like close their eyes to
think
stuff
of
they
the
don't
eyes
want.
as the garage door to your thoughts. So if we're trying to hold something in, like we're trying to focus and trying to remember something, we close our eyes because we're trying to hold that thought in. But we also do it to try to keep a thought out. So if someone tells you tragic news, you might close your eyes like this because you just don't want to allow that to come into your mind. That's exactly what we're seeing there with Bob Ballard. He knew the guy, he had a relationship with the guy. So when
Yeah.
his name comes up, we're just seeing him go, oh man, it's such a tragedy. Not just what happened to him, but what
And
happened to
nodding.
all these people because of him. So I think in this moment, there's this, he's trying to not let this negativity get to him as he's thinking of this tragic moment. It's a very classic gesture. Now let's look at his answer. Remember, this is someone who puts a lot of value on information and competence. And we're
Only
getting a lot of
500
clues
water
here.
runes left.
The first thing he says, he doesn't in any way praise the guy's work, right? Throughout this interview, on numerous times, he's talked about James Cameron, how he knows about this stuff and how he's done this numerous times. He doesn't praise the guy's work at all. He says he was a dreamer. You know, I didn't have that much experience with him. So he kind of avoids the topic of any criticism of the guy's work. Then he says Jim really understands the engineering science of that particular submarine. So this is classic linguistics of someone who prioritizes information because it's all about
Merchant World 24.
understands engineering, science. So he's talking about, again, Jim has more information on this. This is all we're talking about here is information, competence. I don't know. I wasn't involved in this. So this language is very consistent with some of the stuff we're observing that indicates to me this man's priority on information and competence. But overall, his answer
Just put merch stock, Jay. Merch stock. I got you.
correct. He avoids playing the blame game. I don't think in this moment he wants to speak ill of someone who lost their lives. You know, he talks about how the guy was a dreamer, doesn't in any way give him a compliment on his work, which is someone like this who puts in focus on information. That's the best type of compliment he can give someone. He doesn't do that. And he quickly deviates and goes, you know, I didn't really know much about this. Jim's your guy. So let's look at James Cameron's answer now.
Yeah,
Deflect to his
If
friend.
you're going to Titanic, you should be worried about entanglement or some other problem. You shouldn't be worried about the basic platform that you're diving in. Look, I never knew Stockton well, and I had no association whatsoever with
I pushed him away.
OceanGate, but I was aware of the nature of their design, and I had been very critical of that type of design. There was a prior design that was being built. It was a competing design to ours to get to Challenger Deep back a decade ago. And I was very vocal, even to the people involved in that, saying somebody's going to get killed in a wound filament composite hull. it's just a really, really bad idea. But in any case, they never went through any certification process. So that to me is misrepresenting themselves to their paying clients. And I guess one of the lessons is caveat emptor. Really look carefully. If you're going to get into a sub, look carefully at the company that designed the sub, look at its certification, and all those
It's
things.
kind of scary
So
now.
first, I'm sure
Definitely scary.
a lot of you noticed, but again, we have
Back in a bit,
right, these pushing gestures more than once. And one of them, he literally says, no association whatsoever with OceanGate, and we see this gesture where he's distancing himself from this entire project. Then he talks about in the past how we had experience with something similar to this, and again, our gestures are all going to the left. Remember that timeline. So he's talking about the past, and then he talks about that he was vocal to the people involved in that, and once again goes here to the right. So they were separate. Again, so it's so consistent. It's insanely consistent.
Makes sense.
How
Makes
he's
sense.
got this timeline, the past is here, and we have these distancing. He does gesture to the right a few more times as he talks, more like this a couple of times, but this kind of push is when he's trying to distance from an idea, and it's very consistent. In fact, on a completely different interview with CNN, when he talks about this exact same topic, how he had nothing to do with OceanGate, he does the exact same gesture. Right hand pushes away from him. Same gesture, same topic, almost same sentence.
I had nothing to do with OceanGate, and I never tried to warn Stockton Rush of the same thing because I thought maybe they've solved it, you know?
See, this is what I love about what I do, whether it's in an interview room, whether it's on stage, entertaining, whether I'm negotiating, I went out to buy something. These are the types of things you could see in people, and it gives you an idea. So we now know that James Cameron, when he's talking about something that he wants to put distance between him and himself,
pushes it away.
we're seeing this kind of gesture. And it's so consistent. So now that's a little note in my head. So if I'm talking to him and at some point I see this kind of gesture, he's talking about someone or something, it might cue me into, okay, he's trying to put a little bit of distance here. Why is that happening? So as a mentalist, if I see that gesture as they're talking about someone, that plays right into my code reading. I go, okay, this person you're thinking of, there was a bit of an argument, a bit of a fight. You feel like there's been a distance between the two of you. But in everyday interactions, I might see someone talk about someone that they're trying to talk about positively, but they do that kind of gesture, and it allows me to know, okay, well, maybe there's something going on there. There's a little bit more to this story. So these are the little things that we pay attention to, and it's so beautiful, and we see it that consistently. The other thing I want you to notice in that last answer that we looked at from James Cameron is a massive shift in two things. Things that were not happening previously in the interview, but now are happening a lot. One of them is face touching. We're seeing a lot of the hand come up to the face and around the mouth as well, like this. And the second is something we call pacifiers, adapters, or self-soothing gestures.
Self-soothing gestures.
One of the most researched gestures in all of nonverbal communication. We see them all over the world, and they are usually repetitive, massage-like gestures. So you might see it like this on the hands. You might see someone massaging their legs or their arms, and this usually happens in moments of stress. And like everything else, you don't want to pay attention to who adapts more and who adapts less. You want to look for change. So if I'm talking to someone and they constantly adapt, yeah, I can assume that maybe they have a bit of social anxiety, but I'm not going to read too much into that. What I'm paying attention to is someone who doesn't adapt a lot, all of a sudden starts doing it. Or someone who adapts a lot, who all of a sudden stops.
Bro, in 28 minutes, I've only gotten like
just
5 elite clues.
Why is this thing changing? We're all different behaviorally. So this isn't abnormal. It's abnormal for James Cameron. It's happening suddenly. Face touching is the exact same thing.
I just complained and I got 3 elite clues.
In moments of stress, the blood flow in the face shifts. It goes to different places. And often this causes an
mental nose and Pinocchio effect, thermography, planning, anxiety, and lies. Okay.
In moments of stress, we see a lot of face touching. And when it's around the mouth, it's someone subtly trying to keep something in. Because when we're a kid and we say something we're not supposed to say, what happens? Hands come up. As we get older, we get a little bit better at it, but this hand-to-mouth gesture is often associated with something that's either stressful or that we don't want to say or we shouldn't have said. So to me, it's fascinating that all the way at the end, when he's talking about Stockton Rush, all of a sudden, we're seeing two things spike that we weren't seeing before. Adapters and face touching.
Wait, did he, so whenever he was saying like something about his face, right? Like blood rushing to that spot, and I guess does that make it itchy or something? And that's why they need to touch your face or something? That's my guess on why But anyways,
Both big
continue.
signs of stress, and they're happening
And
a
stress.
lot. So he's stressed in this moment, answering this topic. And I think I know why. But before I tell you, let's go back to that CNN interview and look at one last clip before I tell you how all this comes together.
Yeah, you went in your own designed craft that's a submersible that was experimental and didn't go through the sort of the standard safety protocols. But
Correct.
the difference is you were not taking passengers on board. Would you ever
Exactly.
have taken passengers on board a submersible that had not gone through the standard
No.
maritime safety protocols?
No, not at all.
So in that interview, Anderson Cooper is telling him that,
And he closed his
you
eyes,
also
too.
did
He
this.
was like,
you
no.
went down in a sub that wasn't tested, that wasn't approved, it wasn't, certified. And you could see him kind of trying to say something, but then Anderson beats him to the punch when he says, but you were alone. And that's where James Cameron goes, exactly. So we see with that finger, he comes up like this, he says exactly with that smile on his face. So you could see that to him, that's the main distinction. He goes on to say that this is something that he never would have done alone. So he did this for himself, knowing the risks, but he never would have done this with someone
somebody else?
Now,
Huh?
keep that in mind.
Oh, you don't have
Let's
any
think
water
about
runes. Oh,
The
shit.
other interview.
Hold up. Don't have water runes. And I just died, apparently. 'Cause I don't have water runes. Well, okay. Reclaim 300k, okay. Kind of cheap-ish. Let's see. Water runes. Do I have water runes? I only have 9,000 water runes. Okay. That'll do. Where's my pouch? There it is. Wait, no, that's not my pouch. Oh, there it is. That'll do, don't get. Since it looks like we're gonna be here longer, I'll just summon a Ripper, Lantidime stick. Actually, no, never mind. We don't lose the Lantidime sticks. But anyways, good to go. Because we only got 12 elite clues so far. We need 50. Well, 49 because we have one in the bank. Let's get back fast. Continue our behavioral arts learning, I guess. All right. And we continue.
The one on ABC. So we have someone here who has obviously deeply thought about this, right? Because he made his own vessel that also wasn't 100% certified, but he's given thought to the fact that he would have never put someone else in there. That's an important distinction. However, Stockton Rush did make that decision. Stockton Rush did what James Cameron didn't and put people in this vessel that wasn't approved. So obviously to James Cameron, that wasn't a good decision. He would not have done that. So if we go back to the ABC interview, I think two things are stressing him out enormously. The first is the fact that he definitely disagrees, I believe, with the decision that Rush made to put people in that vessel and go down there. I think that if this wasn't a public interview, if you went to James Cameron and asked him one-on-one, what do you think? He would go, I think that was a stupid decision. But he can't say that on TV because once again, he's sensitive to the fact that this man lost his life. He has family who's grieving out there. And I don't think this is the time to start bashing the guy. The second thing that I believe that's stressing him out, and even linguistically he's making excuses for this, is the fact that he has a lot of experience with this. Not only did he himself use a vessel that wasn't, approved or 100% safe, but he once heard of another company who was going to make a vessel like this one, and he told them, don't do this, you will die. He says that in both interviews. He goes, there was another vessel like this years ago, and he does that distancing again, and he says, I told them, do not go into that vessel, you will die in that vessel. But this time, he didn't say that. And imagine the guilt of that. Imagine the guilt of knowing that a part of him knew that this is dangerous, Take that, add to it the fact that Rush wasn't only putting his own life in danger, but other people were going with him. And imagine how
Although I
James
heard-
Cameron must feel knowing, no, he knew that that could mess up. Because previously he warned other people were using the similar
Everybody
technology.
warned.
But in this
Rush.
case, he didn't tell anyone. You know, he didn't call Rush, who he knows, and say, hey man, you can't be doing this. So that's the reason, if we go back and think about this interview, why he keeps distancing. And in both interviews, he's going, I had nothing to do with OceanGate. Because if he had even a little bit of something to do with OceanGate, then that guilt would be way too strong. It would take over.
Okay, I guess that makes
So
sense.
He's putting that distance, and I
If
think
they
the
were
reason
friends.
we're seeing this intense stress is because he's saying,
Assuming they were.
you know, I knew ahead of time. Had somebody asked him, had somebody come to me who said, don't do it, don't go down there. This isn't the way to do this. This carbon fiber, whatever, I don't understand the technicality of this. By the way, it's so impressive how well James Cameron understands this stuff. It's incredible. But yeah, he knew. He knew, given the way this was made, that this is a danger. So he has to put that distance. And that's why we're seeing that stress. It all makes perfect sense. So conclusion, I think it's pretty clear.
Makes sense.
But
Makes
I
sense.
love the fact that in this interview, we have such a great opportunity to see the priority for people and what they value socially. I love that stuff. So on one hand, we have Bob Ballard, who is all about information. I am informed. I know this stuff. James
With
knows
all
this
his stuff in the
Um,
background.
and he's really just focusing on that. And we have all these signs of him going, I'm an expert on this stuff. And then on the other hand,
Well,
we have
definitely.
James Cameron, who
Need
is
to-
a man who's
Pick up my items on the ground.
life is focused on curiosity. I mean, the guy made the Titanic movie as an excuse to be able to go down there and look at the wreck. He's literally made that statement that he didn't
When I
go down to the
learned
wreck to
some
make
other
the
guy.
movie. He
Oh,
made
really? I didn't know that. When I learned some other guys have dived to the Titanic to make an IMAX movie, I said, I'll make a Hollywood movie to pay for an expedition and do the same thing. Oh, interesting.
the movie to go down to the wreck. Like, this is
Interesting.
what he wanted to do. So we have a man here who is a perfectionist. Obviously, look at his movies. The guy has a very high standard, and to him, bringing people into a vessel that didn't meet every standard is unacceptable. But he can't really say that because he doesn't want to speak ill of someone who lost their lives. He doesn't want to play the blame game, and he's kind of holding back.
And he
on his
knows
opinions,
Evie
but at the end of
and
the day, this is a
you know,
terribly tragic event.
everything. Yeah.
And my heart goes out to the victims and their families. I read up about them. I'll leave a link in the description if you guys want to just go find out a little bit more about who the victims were.
All right.
It's so sad. But, you know, a great interview here about...
Yeah. Interesting. But yeah, if you don't know behavioral arts, there's a lot of analysis on stuff. It's interesting. I mean, interesting